We had a lengthy discussion about about pensions earlier on, Minister, but just to ask you, it's obviously on your list of priorities that you published there a few weeks ago, your action plan for pension reform and I think it's the transposition of the IORP2, the EU directive, and auto-enrolment defined contribution pensions. Just where are you? You mentioned that you might be bringing forward legislation on at least one element of that, I think, in the near future. And just a particular interest, obviously, is in relation to pensions across both sides of the Irish Sea. I think you've had some discussions with British ministers on the impacts of Brexit in social protection in both countries and what has been achieved there. Thanks, Kerlock.
Minister.
Our pension system was set up over a century ago to provide an adequate and sustainable standard of living and to prevent an unwanted reduction in living standards when people retire. As the Deputy will be aware, there are a number of challenges currently facing the Irish pension system, including the sustainability of the system over the longer term in light of demographic change, rising life expectancy and the adequacy of contribution levels and benefits. While the state pension was intended to guard against poverty, our expectations have risen since then, and rightly so. People now expect and should expect a decent life and comfort in retirement. Without change, a majority of our citizens are going to rely solely on the state pension in retirement unless the overall pension system is reformed. The cost of maintaining our current standards must be funded, and increased longevity has huge implications for spending on state pensions. I have previously highlighted that pension reform will be a priority for my department, and earlier this year I confirmed an intention to develop, publish and commence the implementation of an action plan for the reform of pensions. It is my intention that the plan will be published this year upon the completion of the required developmental work. The action plan will include a roadmap for the reform of the state pension, rationalisation reform of the defined benefit pension landscape, the transposition of the IORP2 directive, which the Deputy mentioned, and we have 2 years to do that, and the introduction of an auto-enrolment defined contribution pensions for all working people, which I discussed earlier. In relation to interactions with my British counterparts, I had one bilateral meeting in Brussels some weeks ago. One of my counterparts, and I will travel to London in the first week of February to meet with the Secretary of State, Damien Green. And of course, among the issues being discussed is the issue of pension rights, as there are 35,000 people from the UK, or people who receive part of their pension from the UK in this country, and 135,000 people in the other jurisdiction receiving part of their pension as well. And I am determined to ensure that those pensioners' rights are protected.
Deputy.
Here, Minister, and I mean, will you have any input yourself and your department into negotiations between, obviously, the European Union and the United Kingdom to ensure that a very robust position is taken in relation to the protection of pensioners' rights between the two jurisdictions? Just to ask you again, if you've given any further thought to any further reforms of the homemaker scheme. I think it came up extensively in the earlier discussion with Deputy Durkin's question about whether or not the kind of discrimination that mostly women workers feel now, senior women workers, as they retire, and they feel that they're getting maybe 196 or that type of award as their state pension, and feel very hard done by. You estimated before that the cost of reforming the homemaker scheme in order to give those workers who had been on home duties caring a better pension, and I just wondered if you've given that any further thought.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kerlock.
Yeah, I have, and as I committed to Deputy Curran and others, will put forward to the committee detailed options and proposals for change with the costings associated with them. Obviously, if we move from the averaging approach to the total contributions approach, then the homemaker credit scheme has to change because the basis on which it exists therefore changes. But the intention would be to have those changes in place, but not to recalculate everyone's pension who's already been retired. and the cost of doing that would be prohibitive. It would cost hundreds of millions of euros. It's for future pensions that the new rules would apply. And if you did apply the new rules to people who are already retired, you'd be cutting some pensions too. And that's not something that I want to do to anyone. And it's something that I've obviously ruled out. Under no circumstances will anyone who's already retired have their pensions reduced. Sorry, I forgot the first part of the question. Oh yeah, on Brexit. Yeah, well, it's still a developing picture, as you'll know. But what I want to maintain between Britain and Ireland is something that's been in place for a very long time, that people in Britain are free to work in Ireland and vice versa, that people in Britain are free to claim welfare in Ireland and vice versa, and that we recognise each other's social insurance contributions as being the same. So if you paid 10 years national insurance in Britain and 10 years PRSI in Ireland, you paid 20 wherever you are. And I think it's possible for us to maintain those arrangements. I'm more optimistic as to what can be done in relation to people than I am when it comes to trade and goods. But obviously my focus will be on people.
Lovely. Thanks, Minister. Thanks, Deputies. That concludes